This review was really hard to write. The Rest of My Life is a brilliant episode, one of Press Gang's best, but Lord knows how it went out to kiddies at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon. We open in black with sirens. The sound of Abigail Docherty as Mary Bryant, desperate, sobbing, chilling tones. And we're plunged into action stations at the Junior Gazette. Kenny and Lynda rushed off their feet. Kevin, Sonia, Jeff, all the extras are on it. Except Colin. He's on executive think pod time. The sequence finesses a map motif we saw in How to Make a Killing, telling us more about Norbridge's town geography. It's sharing Lynda's genuine talent for manpower logistics. Sometimes urgencies bring out the best in people. And let's take a moment to appreciate Sarah's outfit. For all Press Gang's ridiculous wardrobe flamboyancies, this has to be the best. That and Billy's banter underwrites Lynda's little quip about keeping track of Spike as the first seeds are planted in his story. Brief cuts to Mary and darkness help build pace and credibility. Leo Mac Publishing's Press Gang programme guide informs me Colin Aldridge, man in phone box, would later play PC Phil Young in the bill alongside Nick Stringer. The Fraz subplot already seems silly. That's something Moffat uses to write tension against. The first extended sequence comes immediately for that. Sam's very public spat with Lynda over designing a disaster is the first of these tense moments. Gabrielle Anwar gives some ball-busting intensity, which causes everyone a pause. Maybe a suggestion that despite their two huge egos, Sam doesn't make a habit of going full Lynda on Lynda. Sound Record Store appears to be a nightclub which operates in the afternoon. It's fantastic in terms of set design and lighting. Spike is already cheating on Lynda, trying and failing. It's a note appended to the last few episodes to tell us Spike is often not the shining knight of lore, and a preempting of viewer sympathies for him. Of course, it's out of line to say, cheat on Lynda, they'll throw a building on top of you, but with her reputation, I can't help reading that. EastEnders Max Branning actor Jake Wood appears as Boy at Party. He'll return as Jack in Series 3's Killer on the Line. Maybe it's the same guy, set on a life of crime from the concussion that he endured in the explosion.
Oh, there was that gas leak last year.
Spike smelling gas and dusting off his shoulder is a little idea I want to call genius. Moffat's first time travel story. Setting flash forward in the present, blending the realities, creates an unsettling effect. More building up the pace by micro scenes. Kevin and Sonia ominously told to come home. Fraz's gang and phone sex jokes. Kevin not getting anywhere on the phone because Kate knows someone who works at Sounds. And working out when they called Spike and when he left home. Kenny, as ever, is the voice of stable rationality. Helpful, yes. Cool head v panic. But as we see, sometimes that's not good enough. And then we get Abigail's cries preceded by an unmistakable 2 seconds. 1980s television in the UK was all Cold War and threat of nuclear war, and Thatcher's dismantling of the country in a way that it would never recover.
Kate's boyfriend, Sonia's brother. It's like it's getting closer all the time.
There were also the Northern Irish Troubles, a stupid word for a war. I grew up in that time and feel a strong connection to this episode because of it. Daily news broadcasts of atrocities, panic in the broadcaster's voice, One of my earliest memories was sitting with my mother listening to the radio about some incident, both of us hoping my father or another relative wouldn't be caught up in it. Over the 30-year war, there were 50,000 casualties. That's 2.6% of Northern Ireland's current population. There were many victims from Britain and the Irish Republic and also from elsewhere across the world, but 2.6. It's fair to say everyone was 1 or 2 degrees from someone who was involved. We lived on a fear adrenaline, looked under our cars, looked over our shoulders. I think conveying that sense of panic in disaster is something this episode of Press Gang does very well. Their warm friendship aside, Kenny and Lynda aren't so physical with it. It's a brief moment, his reassuring her, relegated to interrupting cutaway. The main spectacle is pure prestige television. Spike at the club hears the future, the sound of sirens, of Mary Bryant, sees the concrete dust pile heavier on his shoulders. Mary's pleas continue over his glimpsing of his own body in the rubble. The future narrative takes over, zoomed in, but also from different angles to further suggest elements of an out-of-body experience. Director Bob Spears, and maybe more so editor Jeff Hogg, bring these disparate wails and disco music and set pieces of rubble and dance lighting together. The elements are overlapped to create a tapestry that feels suitably alien and unsettling. Kudos to sound editor Tony Pound and mixers Colin Nicholson and Chris Singleton. And when the music stops, it confirms the ground has shifted. I'll be running a feature on Jeff Hogg, who edited 26 of our 43 episodes next time round. In terms of Press Gang, this may be his finest half hour, and all Dexter does is just lie there. Sorry, defense mechanism. The concrete dust on Spike's shoulder works as a metaphor for a trauma that he won't shake off. The Leo Mack episode guide states, Spike grows up from this episode on. His wisecracks are just as free-flowing, but the naive, reckless rebel is all but gone. This is the day Spike changes. That concrete won't wash out. There's another heartfelt moment of friendship in the corridor that primes us for Kenny's defense of Lynda to Sam. The set dressing is fantastic, but for the
she's stupid
amount of cassette tape strewn everywhere, and once it was up, it would have been tough to remove it. But otherwise, well done production designer Alan Cassie and set decorator Simon Wakefield.
You can hear me?
Yeah, well, I took a crack on the head. I wasn't sure. All these pink bunnies, they wouldn't shut up.
I mentioned during my review of Something Terrible there'd be a fair bit of foreshadowing going on. One element is rushing ahead. There's no end credits, duologue. Because aside from tone, a third of the episode is a duologue. Spike and Mary's first conversational scene is 3.5 minutes. Now, Hawkeye and MASH, Blue Beetle and Justice League, Spike belongs to that character type of quit machine. If you're trapped in a situation where silence is terror, you're going to want a Spike Thompson on hand to get you through it. Under scrutiny, Dexter's American accent damages Press Gang, but here he works through it to give us a performance worth sharing on social media. Abigail Docherty is brilliant, more on that in a bit, but as visual acting goes, this may be a one-man show. Cracking wise shows us consistency even where Spike faces his ultimate limits. And of course, he can't sit still. He wants to move Rubble around to get to his fellow survivor. It's worth taking a brief segue into Abigail Docherty's career when she came to this episode. Born 1973 in Irvine, a Scottish girl moving to an English market town in Gloucestershire. At grammar school, she designed, directed, and played Lady Macbeth in a school production of the Scottish play. Thanks to radio academic Tristan Sargent, we know she was broadcast in 1986 on a school service programme, with minor roles in Jude the Obscure and No Highway, featuring Michael Gough, and also Widows, Ariel Dorfman's poverty and politics military drama. In 1987, she popped up on BBC Radio in a full-cast adaptation of Grimm's fairy tale, The Juniper Tree. It's a modern adaptation and quite good with it. She plays Anne-Marie, the daughter at the centre of the narrative of dark comic horror, of filicide and cannibalism. Anne-Marie is a young girl under pressure and distraught, and Docherty carries the part well, quite a good performance. In 1988, she'd voice act in 3 more plays, but it's more notable that it was the year she was a winner in BBC Radio's first Young Writers Award. Listen to My Inside Mind is the internal monologue of an old man with guilt and regrets and some delirium. Other voices pop in and out of his mind as if by the time travel shown in The Rest of My Life, alongside a piece that feels autobiographical, but isn't, because it's a 14-year-old writing an 80-year-old and doing so just wonderfully. And there's magical realism and a story within a story, at times unsettling and often sad, thought-provoking and marvellous. Really, if you come by a copy of this, it's amazeballs. The same year she was shooting Picking Up the Pieces. Susie Norton and Mary Doherty couldn't feel further apart. Susie feels spoiled, a genius pampered, sheltered, even on the autistic spectrum. Susie is annoying. Mary, it's generally agreed, and I suspect Doherty would concur, is more interesting of the two. Abigail's style of diction gives the two commonality in terms of class, which I'll talk about later. But generally, Mary, helped by never being on screen, is a blank slate, and every woman for anyone to empathise with and project onto. Doherty gives an incredible performance conveying shifts of mood and mentality. Abigail uses her breath to change pitch. She alters it from terror at receiving bloody wounds, navigating the difficulty of breathing, to convey hope on connecting with Spike. She's close enough to the mic to be audible and give the conversation intimacy, maybe at a distance to convey distance and those pitch changes. Go back and listen to how her syllables are strung out and broken, how the emphasis expresses the emotional chaotic. There's volume, but not power. Doherty's specifically hiding or holding back her range. And Bob Spears gives Fletcher moments to pause and take in the enormity of it. Moffat paces the joke machine, respecting the heaviness of the situation.
I can hardly breathe, and my head's spinning.
See? It is a party.
Jokes facing death. And if we think comedy will win, balance of terror stays in the newsroom. For example, Lynda has to deal with that Martin fella who used to work at Peter's Market. And then we have Sam, dropping maximum bitch load on Lynda. Anwar's delivery is breezy, flippant, emphasizing keywords to pierce the editor. I happened to pause on a frame where Lee Ross looks happy to be grabbing Gabrielle's shoulders. Call it a slip. As Sam is hurried into the design room, she smiles back. Perhaps a moment of passion's in store. Perhaps Kenny declaring his love for her at last. That's twisted as context. Anwar's expression changes the story. It uses a minimum of dialogue. What we get hits precisely the right beats. A wonderful scene that's perfect for this episode. And actually one of my favourite moments. Just a fantastic scene.
I could smell gas, and he couldn't. I said it must be time to change my underwear. Now, you see, you find that funny. He didn't get it. I had to spend about an hour explaining it to him. Still got the diagram somewhere.
Perhaps I've been influenced by picking up the pieces and putting my ears around Docherty's career, but in the rest of my life, Mary sounds like a slightly posh girl and one who has literally found the earth pulled from under her. That voice opens up an aspect of economic class. There's no airs and graces facing death. If we follow the class hypothesis, these two thrown together bring quite different perspectives which keep them going. If they weren't there under a building, maybe they'd have little to talk about. And we can read Spike's burst of energy or even his disclosure about Lynda as things he says but would not usually say to Mary or people of her stature. I'd love to share with you insights into the making of this episode, but I have nothing. We rarely see Fletcher's right ear, so it's possible there's an earbuds or that Docherty recorded her lines in an adjoining division of the studio. This episode has an ADR editor, automated dialogue replacement or post-syncing, recording extra dialogue in the studio after the film has been captured. The ADR person is uncredited, which seems unlikely if they were all over this episode, but then Nigel Edwards provided uncredited ADR for the whole of series 1 and 2. At times, Fletcher approaches a soliloquy talking about Lynda. This gives us a marvellous moment where Mary and Spike recognise each other. It's brightness in the darkness rejuvenating their spirits. The scenes not set under the record store continue to shore up the drama. Kevin and Sarah's vignette takes just under 45 seconds and says so much about the scale of geography, society, tragedy. It's a simple location and of course another two-hander. Sarah's powerlessness is tangible and Kevin gets a fair amount to do, trying to reassure her. Spike attempts to dig Mary out, but this is not action genre. The script and the lighting allow us to see how the experience is aging Spike. Although Dexter's tash is also showing.
They can even hear him moving. It's got to be Spike.
The workers are getting through to Spike, though he's quiet. Another classical, almost still, composed by Bob Spears and director of photography James Davis. Davis was DOP for 29 episodes. His astounding career will get a feature at some point. Concisely, he was active from 1948 to 2002, with a final TV movie in 2016. He's worked in key roles on things you know: Moonraker, Superman, Dune, Octopussy, Patriot Games, Interview with the Vampire, and many others.
It's a pity you're late, guys. You missed one hell of a nice girl.
Oh, that line hits hard. The denouement affects, shot in the harsh light of day. Dexter Fletcher's performance is one of his best on this show. It's not just the tears in his voice, but the bare movement, Those quick changing facial expressions, that elasticity is gone. He's fixed into place. He's stuck. We see a glimmer of Lynda reaching out, trying to understand, even a bit of characteristic press gang comedy.
How about anagrams?
I volue?
Me too.
But are her efforts enough? Something to explore in the episodes to come. Now we're going to hear a little from my friend and peer, press gang superfan and literary mind, Tristan Sargent, to talk about Mary Bryant and how Steven Moffat uses this story to talk about Spike and mortality. Way you go, Tristan.
Press Gang's a show with quite a lot of tragedy in it, surprisingly so perhaps, not so much given the age group at which it's aimed, but given the frequency with which it's a really funny show. I don't know that many comedies are quite as devastating, emotionally speaking, as Press Gang often is. But of all the tragedies in Press Gang, For the Rest of My Life is the one I find most affecting for various reasons, and it's certainly the one that stopped me from being someone who just watched Press Gang and turned me into someone who's a fan of it.
In a strange way, Mary Bryan may be my favourite Press Gang character. I suppose that's ironic, because I'm not necessarily sure that she is actually a character. She's a very effective, sentimental device, but I don't think that she serves any purpose for herself. She just exists to facilitate Spike's story, his development, and Spike and Lynda's, therefore Lynda's, story. It would be very easy, very tempting to say that perhaps that's just how it is with guest characters. Except you only have to think back to Something Terrible to see that Cindy absolutely is a self-contained character with her own story. Something is happening to her, adjacent to, not dependent on, the regular characters. Even though the story builds on the frustration felt by Colin of being trapped as an observer in that situation. I suppose the two stories are actually slightly more similar to one another than you might think at first. Both feature regular cast members who are connected to a completely new character who is in a terrible, terrible place, in every sense of the word. And both of them might desperately want to help, but are completely unable to. Obviously, Something Terrible ends in a slightly less bleak way than For the Rest of My Life does. For the Rest of My Life does what Press Gang typically does whenever death is a feature of a storyline, which is to fully acknowledge that it's something that happens and that there's nothing you can do about it. Funnily enough, the line that I've found most memorable in all of Steven Moffat's Doctor Who scripts is in the story most concerned with death, which is Heaven Sent, where the Doctor says, "The day you lose somebody isn't the worst, at least you've got something to do. It's all the other days that come afterwards." And while I would assume that the Steven Moffat who wrote that story is not the same Steven Moffat who wrote For the Rest of My Life decades earlier, they do seem to contain the same sentiment. When Spike talks at the end about how he feels about Mary, how he seems to use a contradictory statement. He says, "It feels like I've known her for the rest of my life," which I take to be a realization that this is a person that, even though you didn't even properly meet them, and even though the time you spent with them you weren't able to look at their face, there was just a voice in the dark, they're going to be someone who's with you for the rest of your life. You're always, always, always going to think about them. I suspect Spike doesn't think about Mary Bryan 10 years later quite as much as he does the day after meeting her, but it's very natural in that situation that you would think these thoughts are never going to leave me, these memories of this person. All of the crisis related to a brush with mortality when you're young. There's another interesting Doctor Who connection in my view, which is that Mary Bryan is not the last young woman caught in the jaws of death and plaintively speaking out of the darkness. In Silence in the Library, Miss Evangelista meets a horrible fate, and she's eaten alive by particulate shadow creatures. Moffat introduces the idea of a data ghost, the idea that your personality could be recorded at the moment of your death by a piece of technology and for a short time replay recreating the confusion and fear that you would feel if you were still really there. Even if it's just a piece of technology pretending to be a person, the humans who are hearing it, they call it a ghost. But anyway, that's how Miss Evangelista leaves the story for the first time. She's reduced to a voice speaking out of darkness, or out of nothingness, asking for the nice woman, just asking for the comfort of somebody's company in moments of fear. The idea returns again, less literally, in Asylum of the Daleks, where, of course, the character of Oswin is introduced, a character we subsequently come to know as Clara. She's trapped somewhere deep and dark and inaccessible, and she's frightened, and the only contact she can have with other people is to talk to them. And the Doctor goes looking for her, searching for her based on her voice, and at the last moment, when he thinks he's about to rescue her, he realises that no, she's far, far away, and it was just a voice that he was chasing, which is very, very different to how it plays out in For the Rest of My Life, and yet it's also the same. When Spike clears the rubble, and just when he thinks he's getting closer, he realises no, Mary's buried well beyond his reach, and it's just her voice carrying up a pipe. And it's only thinking about it now that I remember how devastating that was when I saw it for the first time. I would have been 13 or 14.
It's a great episode.
After press gang, Docherty began an English degree at Oxford and went on to study film at Edinburgh College of Art. The Rest of My Life is a fantastic early-like representation of her career. Through the 90s, she continued voice acting and reunited with Dexter Fletcher in John Peacock's post-apocalyptic drama, Joe's Kingdom. Very active, took on the role of Yarrow in Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea alongside Judi Dench in 1996. I was fortunate to hear her reading of Evelyn Waugh's short story Cruise from 2003, where that received pronunciation is put to good use. That year she was a scriptwriting fellow for the Scottish Arts Council, quite influenced by Harold Pinter, as well as a visiting writer at the International School of Audiovisual Creation in Paris. That was followed by Floral Facts and Floral Fictions, a real-time story written for BBC Radio. It follows a man crossing the capital to win back his girlfriend and made use of real interviews with Londoners. In 2009, she was mentored by Ian Finlay MacLeod as part of the Playwright Studio Scotland's mentorship scheme. She began a closer working relationship with Tron Theatre Glasgow, writing the play 1000 Paper Cranes, a tale of two friends and their ambition under the radiation of Hiroshima. It met with rave reviews. Directed by Lou Kemp, with Melody Grove in the cast. Both worked on a Docherty script in the Tron early the following year. Room is a story of a woman happy to stay home with her imagination and the world that wants her to come outside. The Tron received 300 proposals in their open stage playwriting competition. You guessed it, Abigail's pitch won. She also received the prestigious Pearson Playwrights Bursary. Sea and Land and Sky focuses on three nurses who go to the front line of war-torn France, each with differing economic and emotional status. The play had its world premiere at the Tron, October 2010, and was also directed by Lou Kemp. I was fortunate enough to listen to two more of Abby's penned works from around this time. Ursula and Boy, a BBC Radio 4 afternoon play. Set in Essex 1852, among the backdrop of the witch trials, it's a tragic tale of a community-focused single mother with postnatal depression. Though focusing on mother and son, it's exemplary at building a sociological vista from a minimal ancillary cast. A tale of pain where society twists love and creativity into state murder. Profoundly affecting work worth seeking out. Special hats off to Natalie Press in the lead role. In 2013, BBC Radio broadcast Edward, a focus on two people, children, who would be Lady Jane Grey and Edward VI, crowned at age 9. Kids powerless in a world facing institutional surveillance, the bloody deaths of family, duologues and internal monologues, occasionally intruded upon by tumultuous environments. It includes a theme Docherty returns to throughout her career: women and children in war-torn environments. It's her fourth piece, if I'm right, directed by Lou Kemp. Lou would go on to train at l'École Internationale de Théâtre Jacques Lecoq, Paris. Kelda Holmes attended there in the early 90s. A flurry of press in 2020 announced Dr. Abigail Docherty would co-direct a Master's in Writing for Performance at the Institute of Continuing Education, University of Cambridge. The course is aimed at studying the energy in contemporary scripts and how to build a career, from who to contact, how to approach, and getting a production company to read a script. It helps with collaborative work as well as networking, and in Abigail's words, is designed to help break out fresh, exciting voices. She's also leading up a year-long undergraduate diploma in creativity, history, and philosophy, as well as creative writing and evolution of ideas. It layers courses in psychology, natural science, and material science. For Cambridge, she's also teaching a 4-week MicroMasters program, Finding Your Voice as a Playwright. That's available as a free online course with $300 for certification. And honestly, she's done a bunch of whole other stuff I've forgotten about, or more likely don't have time to fit in here. All impressive, isn't it? Thank you for spending time here. Thanks always to my patrons who light my fires doing this. Thanks to Tristan Sargent for his troves of research on Docherty's career in radio and his contributed commentary. Give us a sub and a like. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Abigail uses her voice in this episode, Dexter Fletcher's acting, and how Press Gang handled the emergency disaster story. What was going through your mind when you first watched this episode?